keen to check it out in detail. So that here, so there we go. You can see there, country's like a patchwork. So like a patchwork effect, you can see. And you'll notice a bit of a trend, if you look at it, that near the coast, the coastal areas, you'll see the land areas the groups had marked out were smaller. Because again, there's more resources there. It's easier to live off the land in those areas. Whereas once you come out here into the middle of the continent, in the desert areas, you see the areas are bigger because they needed those bigger areas to be able to live off. Now, the people you'll meet today, the Warlpiri people, their land, their country area is this light green patch there. Big light green patch. Alice Springs is sort of down in the junction here of all these areas that have come together. That's where Alice Springs is. So this light green patch there, that is the Warlpiri land. So yeah, big area. That's equivalent to about the size of the country of England, basically. That's about the same sort of land area. But obviously very different conditions to England. Certainly not rolling green fields out there. It's the green patch there is an area called the Tanami Desert. That's their homelands, the area where and a lot of the older people still like to head out there and live out there from time to time. But yeah, in that whole Warlpiri area, there would have been less than 2,000 people living off that whole area, but living in small groups, not all together in one town or anything like that. So yeah, pretty remarkable. And that was their area. On the back here, just quickly, on the back here, this gives you an idea of all the different language groups that were across the country. Just give you an idea that, yeah, a lot of, because of that travelling in small groups and splitting up and all that sort of thing, over time all these different language groups developed. So this is at the start of white settlement. There was literally hundreds and hundreds of different groups. So in a way, Australia, instead of being sort of one sort of indigenous country, so to speak, I guess it was like a collection of nations in a way. And I think maybe in the States you had a pretty similar thing for your Native American people, probably quite a similar sort of style. But yeah, sadly a lot of these language groups are no longer with us, especially the ones sort of in the coastal areas and the more populated areas of Australia. I guess over time languages have been lost, and it sort of goes back to the idea that the Aboriginal people never had a written text or books or things like that. They never had written language. Everything was all passed on by word of mouth. So if the elders didn't pass on the language to the young people, then those languages over time would be lost. But we're lucky here in the central part of Australia that those three main groups I mentioned, their language is still kept quite strong because it's still spoken by a lot of people. And these days in the schools they have what they call bilingual education. So the Aboriginal kids actually learn in their own language for half the day, and then they learn in English. So that keeps the language still going. And it's all written down these days. It's whereas it used to be just totally passed on by word of mouth. So that has certainly changed a lot. So as I said, you can get copies of this map in town if you are very keen. I've seen this map in a number of shops in town. Very, very interesting. Yeah, just to realise how the Aboriginal people lived off the land. It was a very tough lifestyle, I can tell you. It was a really, especially in this part of the country, very tough existence they had. You can understand, like living off the land here, you need to have your wits about you. They had very strict social system, generally speaking, a very strict social system, and relied on the individual discipline and people contributing to the group. If you look at the Aboriginal people's social system they had, you might even sort of regard it as being, we'd almost term it as being sort of communistic. A real de-emphasis on the individual. It was about your role in society as a man or a woman. You had in effect a job to do. You had to help the rest of the group. It was about sharing everything too. Like say I've been out with the men hunting. Maybe I caught myself a nice big lizard, a big sand goanna, a big lizard. These can get quite big, like this long, quite large. So I'm hauling that back to camp at the end of the day, and middle of summer, and I'm just thinking, oh gee, it's been a heck of a day. I'm really tired. I'm really beat. I'm just sort of wanting just to nick off behind the sand dune. I'm going to cook this up and just eat it all myself. That's what I feel like doing. Well, if I was ever caught doing something like that, not sharing food or another way breaking the tribal law, then I would be severely punished. And a typical punishment for a man was to have a spear rammed through your thigh. And this is a particular type of spear called a punishing spear, not just a normal hunting spear. I'll be showing you a hunting spear later on, but this punishing spear is scary. I've seen a few of them, and they're very scary. And they'd be rammed through my thigh, pulled and twisted, and then ripped back out again. And usually that was a fatal punishment. That was usually lethal. It would kill you. Usually you'd bleed to death, because that usually would sever the femoral artery in your leg. And you might think, well, gee, that's really tough. Why, just for not sharing food. But thinking about it, that if I didn't share food, and then the rest of the people of the group might starve. You had to share. Everything was shared, and it was really important. Water, everything like that. All the resources need to be shared among the group for everyone to survive. And the young ones, as soon as they could walk, they'd be starting to help out. The young girls would be taught by the older women to go out and gather different plants and things the group would need. The young boys, they'd be with the older men, and they'd be learning the hunting skills as soon as they could walk. They'd be starting, because everyone needed to sort of be productive. Things like if say I was out hunting one day and I've had an accident and tripped over, or something's happened and I've broken my leg, I can't expect the rest of the group to look after me, because they're not going to be able to build a stretcher and carry me around and all that sort of thing. What would happen in that case, I'd be just they'd sit me under a tree, they'd sing me my last sort of song and rites, and then the rest of the group would walk off and just leave you. And again, that might seem terrible to us, but it's all about that survival, because they just simply couldn't expend that energy in sort of keel hauling someone around on a stretcher or something like that. No, you have to be able to if you could look after yourself and survive, well, fine. But usually those people would perish. It was a very tough lifestyle. Life expectancy was low. Typical age for an Aboriginal man back then would have been probably about the age I am now, about mid-40s. That was a typical age. The Aboriginal man would pass away. Their body would literally be worn out from all the moving around, because it was a nomadic lifestyle. You move into an area, you hunt and gather in that area, use the water in that area, and then once that's depleted, you leave. You have to leave. If you don't leave, you'd perish. So that nomadic lifestyle, being on the move all the time, always a constant thing, trying to find enough food and water, enough protein to keep your body in good condition, your body would just literally wear out. The life expectancy these days is better. They're still not up with not Indigenous people in life expectancy, but it is getting better. The main problem the Aboriginal people have these days is probably lifestyle diseases, and the fact that they're eating a lot of our westernised food, which is not really very good for them, doesn't sort of suit them genetically. So the big problem that the Aboriginal people have these days, things like type 2 diabetes, kidney disease, things like that. They are rather vulnerable to that because of the genetics. And in fact, a lot of the medical practitioner people, they say, well, the nutritionists, they encourage them to actually go back to a more traditional diet if possible. A lot of the older people still like to have those traditional foods. In fact, my colleague Conrad, he often takes them out hunting and gathering different things from time to time. The older people still love to do that. The younger people probably not so interested. Probably easy for them just to, they like to go into the golden arches, dare I say, or something like that, which is a bit of a sad thing, because that sort of food, if they eat that sort of food all the time, it can be a real problem. Things like sugary drinks as well, they are really a bit of a fatal attraction to sort of, sugary lemonade and stuff like that. They love it, because they never had that back then. And I guess it's seen as a bit of a luxury, having all that sugar and salt and things like that, but it can be problematic. But the life expectancy is getting better over time. It's improving, but yeah, it was a very tough life. Now, basically, and I said low life expectancy. Also, the fertility was really affected because of that, diet and getting enough. Ladies, you'd know that to have children, you need to have a certain amount of body condition. If you're really skinny and undernourished, and that it's going to be very hard for you to have children. The scientists, they've done a study, they reckon that the Aboriginal women probably back then would have been lucky to ovulate maybe 2 or 3 times a year if they were lucky. So very hard to have children. The men's sperm count was also quite low. So yeah, fertility was a big issue, and that affected the marriage system to a great degree as well. The Aboriginal girls, as soon as they reached puberty, so probably 13, 14 years of age, they would be married off straight away. Yeah, and we think, well, but again, it's because of that. The best chance they had of having children was when they were younger, when they still had that reasonable amount of body condition. That's why. So, yeah, they'd be quite young, and they'd be married. Now, the marriages, how the marriages were done, it was actually a matriarchal system. So the mother of the daughter, she would determine who married her daughter. The men had no choice in that at all. It was all a matriarchal system, an arranged marriage. Nothing to do with love or romance or anything like that. It was all about survival, keeping the family line going. So the mother of the daughter, she would determine which man had to marry her daughter, and it was a pretty rigorous process to it too, because he would have to be from the right family group, because the Aboriginal people developed this system called the skin system. It's a system of naming people which identifies which family group you're from. And that's very important because through the years they must have had times where couples were brought together, married together, tried to have children, and either they couldn't have children, they're infertile, or maybe the children were born severely disabled. The genetics were too close in an inbreeding situation. And the Aboriginal people were clever enough to realise that. They worked it out, and they worked out this system of marriage where you would marry no closer than your fourth cousin distance. So yeah, so that kept the genetics from getting too close together. Very, very important. And that system now is largely sort of gone by the wayside. The skin system, they still keep the skin names, and they still keep that identity. But yeah, a lot of the young ones now, I notice in town now, they married in a normal sort of westernised way now. Marry for love. They may marry an Aboriginal person from another part of Australia. There's even quite a lot more mixed marriages these days. Used to be a bit of a stigma about that, but a lot less now. So yeah, that sort of system has started to break down, the marriage system. But back then it worked very well.